What's good, everybody? This is Brian J's Nerd Talk, and I just spent the last, 12 hours reading the last couple of parts and pages of this book. And this is not a fantasy book or a science fiction book. This is a real book based on a horrific killing spree, crime spree that happened that started over 100 years ago in Osage County against the Osage people, and it's Killers of the Flower Moon. It's a really great book. It's a masterpiece. It's fantastic, but it's just so sad and tragic and so horrifying. You know, what happened to these people is just hundreds and hundreds of Osage people were just murdered, and only two guys went to prison for it. William Hale and one of his nephews went to prison. Two of his nephews. William Hale and one of the guys that was married to Molly, who was the woman that William Hale was targeting. Like, he killed like her sisters, her mother, so that all the head rights and money would go to her, and she was killed, and the money would go to the nephew, and it would go to Hale. And these white people were just murdering these Osage people because these are like the richest people per capita. Like, each person had like $30 million to their name, because there was so much oil on Osage County. They had so much oil, and they were digging up all this oil that was discovered in the 1890s, I think, and then by the early 1900s, the first decade of the 1900s, they just became super rich and got so much money. But because of racism, there were these white people that didn't think that they could be in charge of their money or knew how to handle it. So these white people, these white businessmen, became guardians of all these Osage people that had all the money. And what they started doing is that they started killing them off one by one by one. I mean, there was, between the year 1907 to 1923, there was about 38 deaths. Most of them were mysterious. Some were just like blatant murder or looked like murder. And these guys were paying off doctors who were like giving the poison to Osage people, that were also covering up the death records. There were two undertakers. There was like an undertaker company that would like make the bodies disappear or something, so there wouldn't be any autopsies or any suspicion. And William Hale was not the only one. There were a lot of rich, powerful white men and women that were doing this too. They were all doing it. And people wonder, how could somebody do something like this? It's because of racism and these people just being psychopaths. I mean, the Osage people, Native Americans, were not viewed as human beings. They were viewed by many white people 100 years ago to be no different from animals, dogs, or whatever. So it just justified killing and murder. And they were just obsessed with getting the money. You know, it was just greed, just the very, very dark side of extreme capitalism in America. Like, it was just horrific. And this book, it's a great book. I give it a 10 out of 10. It's well researched. I mean, the writer, David Grann, he did his research. He's got nothing but references in this book that you could research and look it up. You know, I mean, it's crazy, man. This was the biggest killing spree I've ever read about. Like, you know, and this is like happened over years and years. Like, what white people did in Black Wall Street, they killed, you know, hundreds of black people, maybe 1,000 or so, and displaced 10,000 black people from their homes. And that was like a 2-day terrorist attack that happened. But with the Osage people, this happened over like 20 years, 25 years. It just kept going on and on and on. And it was crazy. It was crazy. William Hale was convicted because he had the biggest killing spree. You know, he killed Molly's entire family. He killed her sisters, her mother, I think her brother-in-law. I don't remember if he killed her father. But yeah, he basically killed her whole family. And that's why he went to jail for life. And he got paroled after like 20 years because he's like in his 70s. You know, it's like, and it took forever for William Hale to get convicted because they couldn't find 12 jurors who were white men that were convinced that a white man killing an Indian was wrong. Like, because they didn't view Indians as people. They viewed them as no different from dogs. So that's why the decision from the jury was always deadlocked. It took like a couple of months to convict this guy. And then they finally did. They gave him life in prison instead of the death penalty because he was a white man. Like, it's just, the open racism 100 years ago was just insane. And we can't let that shit come back. But this is just horrific. And yeah, and the Osage people never get justice. They lost hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of family members. I mean, based on the numbers. And yeah, they're never really going to get justice. And that's just tragic. And so now I'm fully ready to watch the movie. The movie looks incredible. It's directed by Martin Scorsese, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Robert De Niro, Lily Gladstone. The movie looks incredible. It looks like it's very faithful to the book and the history and everything that went down. And yeah, people need to know about this horrific crime. This is recent, you know. And white people always say that. It's like, oh, you can't be upset about things that happened 400, 500 years ago. I'm like, this happened 100 years ago. Like, yeah, a lot of this stuff is still recent. And in some cases, it's still happening, you know. We have so many black people, Native Americans, that have been killed and disappeared with no justice, no investigation, no lead up, no follow up, nothing. Meanwhile, a white woman disappears and all of America is just going crazy. Everyone's trying to look for her. And then of course they find the guy who they thought was the killer in the first place. It was her boyfriend. And they're making a whole movie about her. Really. So that's racism. I felt bad for that white woman, but with all the media attention in America looking for her and everything, like if they did half of that for the average Native American woman, the average black woman, and I mean, let's face it, I mean, most Native American women would not be raped and killed and disappear at the rate that they are, and black people, you know, it's crazy, man. But anyways, fantastic book, very depressing, but I read it, and yeah, I might even read parts of it again to get ready for the movie, like read the whole last couple of chapters. The last couple of chapters are just haunting because you realize that it wasn't just William Hale. William Hale wasn't an isolated incident. It was a constant thing from so many other white men in his position of power, but it was a constant thing from other white people as well. It was like a constant killing spree because of racism and greed and wanting money. So that's my review. I give Killers of the Flower Moon a 10 out of 10. Great book. And this is Brian J's Nerd Talk. And I'll talk to y'all later.